My name is Becky McLaughlin, and I am the Director of Marketing at WithMe, home of multifamily amenities, Print with Me and Sip with Me. We're happy to host a panel discussion today on the hot topic of budgeting for ROI and retention. This session is being recorded. I just heard the little sound go off that it is being recorded and shared with attendees after the event. It will also be available for playback for you to share with your colleagues. Today's discussion will be led by WithMe's CEO and founder, Jonathan Treble, who is on the line right now. And we're thrilled to have special guests with us as well, who he will introduce in just a moment. I want to make a quick note before we get started that we will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. So feel free to send your questions along the way. And we will be, again, monitoring the chat and answering your questions throughout the discussion. With that being said, I would like to turn the discussion over to Jonathan.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Becky mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of WithMe, which is an amenity company in multifamily. And I am very excited to have two expert panelists with us today to talk about budget season. We have Juan Mendoza, who is the regional property manager at Peak Properties, has spent over a decade in the industry. Before Peak Properties, I knew Juan from his many years at the Habitat Company, one of the leading management companies in Chicago. And Juan, most recently, we worked together on a very large luxury property. I think probably their jewel in the portfolio at Habitat. So thank you, Juan, for joining. And we have Nichole Oswald, who is the Director of Client Services at Cushman and Wakefield. She is based in the Chicago area. And prior to her role in client services, which is a newer role for her, she spent a decade, just about a decade, maybe more in the operations side of the business. So she knows budgeting extremely well. Thank you, panelists, for joining. I'm excited for a very riveting discussion. And with that, we'll go to our first topic today. We wanted to start with the macro trends facing the whole industry as we go into 2024, because we know that this is going to inform how property managers, regional managers, executives think about budgeting for the upcoming year. With that, I'll ask the question here to our panelists. What are owners expecting for revenue and for NOI, net operating income, in 2024? Whoever wants to chime in, go for it.
I can go ahead and start a brief, just quickly on that one. It's hard not to talk about 2024 budget without acknowledging the actuals that we have seen here for July and the mindset that we've been in here, for 2023, and the mindset that we've been in for this year. And I think a lot of it has been the talk of possible recession. So I think it's been multiple management companies where it's increased income, of course, slim down expenses wherever you can, more than ever. And I think we're still coming off with that COVID mindset of, hey, we got hit really hard during that time. So it's been bracing that, and it's been embracing new technology, new policies, new procedures in order to slim down expenses and increase income. So that's what I see for 2024, where it's maintaining that mindset, to increase that bottom line, basically.
Well said.
I agree. I feel like obviously, that's always the focus, is in improving NOI and growing NOI. But I think that we're seeing a little bit more of a realistic approach, and with not really knowing what's going to happen. Will we enter a recession? Won't we? I think a lot of owners are being a little bit more cautious with their budgeting, and they want to make sure that the numbers are as realistic as possible. So if we're saying, we can save X on marketing or X on repairs and maintenance, they want, details on that, why we feel like we can do that and how we can grow income. And is it a realistic growth? Will we actually see those numbers? So I think there's just more of a discussion around how we're getting to that place, so that they can feel really comfortable with their underwriting, with their, investor reporting and all of the things that go into running a property. So I think we're just seeing a little bit more conversation than maybe we have in the past. and wanting to understand how we're getting to our numbers.
And I've heard that there are some expense categories that are rising that are uncontrollable. Is that true for this coming year?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, speaking directly to the Chicago market, taxes have always been kind of a anomaly and something that is never really a given. It's a lot of fighting and trying to understand where the tax numbers are coming in at. Insurance is obviously a big thing. I think we don't see that as much in Chicago, but I know in other markets where we have clients that are operating in, Florida, Texas, the other states that have had a lot of instances of, environmental impacts, hurricanes. Insurance is constantly a conversation about how they can make the numbers work.
Okay. So it sounds like between the prospect of a recession coming and the idea that there are going to be expense categories that are rising uncontrollably, is it safe to say that the focus for 2024 that owners want to see is more on the expense side than on revenue growth?
I think I've seen more of a realistic approach to revenue growth. It's very much, we had really great revenue growth post-COVID, and I think that's starting to level off. So I think everyone's kind of in a more realistic mindset of what the rent growth is going to look like in 24. So then it's, how can we trim down expenses, but again, make it realistic. We don't want to say that, we can operate this property with no marketing budget, for example, but a better understanding of what the expenses are, how we can reduce them, what efficiencies we can create, utilizing technology, all of that stuff is definitely a big focus.
Okay. Well said. Well, that's the great background for the next 3 slides we have, which are going to be more tactical about the budgeting process and where property managers can focus this coming year. Let's talk first about healthy budget process. We have 3 questions here. We'll go in order. This is just about kind of good hygiene in running the budget process. What do you folks believe are the key touch points to have in a healthy budget process?
I think the biggest thing is time. So just earmarking time for yourself every week. Give yourself, if you're able to, give yourself 4 hours a week if it's early on in the budget season, which most of us are in right now. And so really just closing your door, put a do not disturb sign, or work from home. Or if you're in the office, just, put the AirPods on with noise cancellation and just really just laser focus into giving yourself that grace and that time for the budget so that you're not waiting till last minute. Start on the harder parts. So I know a lot of times some of us may have to do the rent schedule, others don't. But if the rent schedule, in my opinion, is one of the most crucial parts, because you need to have the data for preliminary data for move-ins, move-outs, because if you have automation set up or unit metrics, whatever you call it in your model, a lot of those will pull from how many move-outs, how many move-ins you have. So it gives you a nice baseline. Asking questions is also so crucial. Don't be shy. Ask your regional, ask your fellow community managers, ask your, the person who created the budget or who's in charge, the budget director. I think those 3 things are probably some of the most important, very basic things to start with.
Okay.
I agree. I'm not going to date myself too much, but back when I was on site, most of our budgets were done in Excel. So it was a challenge that I think there's still a challenge today, but there's more technology out there to help with the budgeting process. But a couple of things that I think are just tried and true that span, back when we didn't have as much technology to today when we have more technology. I think the biggest things are making sure that you understand the client or the owner expectations for the property really well as the property manager, understanding what their goals are, understanding, the pieces that go into making the property operate. And the best way to do that is to ask them and have that conversation with them, either in person or over the phone, because that's really how you're going to get your best understanding of what their goals are for the property. Then the other tool that I always used back when I was on site was just monthly notes. So every time I was doing the monthly variance report, I would have a notepad. Again, this is before OneNote. So just a notepad, and I would write down, okay, we had a negative variance in R&M because there was a sewer backup that we didn't plan for. So maybe we need to account for that next year in the budget, or we were actually favorable in marketing spend. We didn't need to utilize ILS this month, whatever the case might be, and having that ongoing note so that when it did come time for budget season, I wasn't trying to remember 6 months ago what happened, why was there this negative variance. I was able to just look back at my notes and high level understand, okay, this is why we're favorable, unfavorable. This is how I think that we can, change next year, whether I think it's a one-time thing or it's going to be an ongoing situation. So I think those are two big pieces that a lot of property managers, just adding those into your daily, weekly, monthly tasks can really help set you up for success.
Great points. And we already started touching on it, but the next question is, how can property managers leverage their peers for budget advice, tips? What have you seen work best, Juan and Nichole?
I'd say budget workshops are just hands down. I think that's one of the best things you could do. Having fellow managers or your regional also there too, just bouncing, even if you're not working on the same budget, you're working on your own budgets, but you synergize, you get the juices flowing. Somebody might also be like, hey, I already have the union rates for 24, or hey, I've got the utility increase, the projections that we're showing. And you just share that right there. And then I think is one of the most, the best things that you can do during the budget season, for that. And you're also creating bonds. This is for most people, this is one of the most stressful times, and you're creating this bond with fellow teammates. And I think that's also really crucial.
I agree. I think budget workshops are just so important because a lot of times it's just the experience. You might not have a property that is a high rise in the city, but you're having that dialogue with people that are managing that asset class. And so you're picking up that knowledge. So you might forget to budget for something that they bring up, and then it helps you better budget. And to Juan's point, I think just building that camaraderie, especially at such a stressful time, and having people that that you can count on to ask questions is so important.
Yep, great point there. I'm sure folks are excited for their budget workshops coming up. We have one last question on this topic, and then we'll go to the next. What are some effective ways to track ROI performance throughout the year?
I think it's going to have to be data analytics. It's month over month data. It's quarter over quarter, year over year. It's data doesn't lie. And it's asking if you're talking about your rent schedule, it's like, okay, well, let me get axiometrics. Let me get the CoStar multifamily reports. Having those data, those numbers, they help profoundly. And I don't think you can do one without the other, in terms of keeping your staying on track with your information, historicals, but also knowing what possibly to expect in the market.
Agree. And I think back to the point of just understanding client/owners expectations. So if you are pushing a new technology or a new platform or just a new process, and most owners are going to ask, what does this do? How does it benefit the property? How does it benefit the residents? And having a plan in place when you go pitch whatever it is really important and really crucial. And it just sets you up to be a better, more well-rounded manager, because you're able to see kind of the big picture of, hey, we rolled this out, and this is, whether or not it works, like you get an answer to that question. This technology didn't work. The ROI wasn't what we expected, or it does work, and we did get an ROI that was better than we expected. It's all about testing and planning and making sure that you communicate with the client and understand their expectations, and then follow through and follow up and keep communicating. Hey, we're seeing maybe the first month the ROI isn't great, but if you do a trial for a long enough time, you'll be able to take that data and go back to the client and say, hey, this is what we saw. this is why we would either recommend rolling this out at other communities or why we think we don't need it in next year's budget, whatever the case might be.
Okay, well said. We'll move on to the next topic. We're going to get more into the nitty-gritty of budgeting. So expense reduction strategies. There's a lot here. We'll try to narrow to the discussion because expenses are just, it's a huge set of line items, right? But if we can focus first on just generally areas that are maybe ripe for savings in 24. I'm curious, Juan and Nichole, what do you think are some areas that the audience here could maybe pay more attention to and could unlock some savings as we're going into a year that's focused on a stronger NOI?
So this is, I could talk like for hours about this. This is something, I love saving money. And so, I think the lowest hanging fruit, in my opinion, is going to be saving money and your electrical lighting costs. And the reason I say this is low hanging fruit in a way is LEDs have come, lighting has come down in pricing so much. The motion photo sensing switches also have reduced in pricing for both indoors and outdoors. In addition to that, you also have an increased ESG score, increased LEED score. So this pays dividends. Also, not to mention, it also will help save in payroll costs. Now the LED light will last a whole lot longer than the incandescent or the fluorescent light. So you're saving money monthly, no matter what. So to me, this is where I would start if you're looking to save money in your 2024 budget, or just in real time now. Start looking into those things and maybe just either start implementing them this year. And then there's ways to track. You can track, the ROI on this. There's models for this. It's super easy to do. Most of the time when you partner up with a company, though, they will give you that data and show you the ROI on it. So I think that's low hanging fruit. But I would also address any big expenses that you've been seeing lately, whether it's, in your elevators, exterminating. Those are also things that you can start that will, set the stage for you. Some real life examples I would say for, is, let's say you do have, and I'm in Chicago, some of the buildings that I've have access to, have managed, have been at, unfortunately have water bugs, or, I started first in the affordable sector. Some of the buildings I managed, unfortunately, had bed bug issues. Things that you can do to mitigate these things, where you can do canine inspections quarterly and then drop them off to once a year or so, whatever have you, but it saves you thousands and thousands of dollars. If you've got a water bug issue, there's a million things that you can do to help prevent a 30-year-old building from having them spread. And I know it's not a topic that a lot of us like to address, but it's a real topic. So diatomaceous earth is something that you can have your on-site team spread over in your catch basins, behind the walls, whatever it is. But typically it's a plumbing issue though, for water bugs, but I could talk forever on that. Elevator issues. If you keep having entrapments, if something's not working for you, maybe it's time, you get a game plan, a strategy going with the current company. You might need to switch up a company. And, even though you've had a long-standing relationship with them, if you keep seeing a ton of maintenance tickets, then and the problem might not be getting fixed. It's sometimes you take your car to the mechanic, and unfortunately, there's mechanics out there who do don't do things the right way, and you might end up with a bigger problem later, and they want you to come back. So finding good, reputable companies in discussing the elevators is another important thing. Phone line audits, that's something's easy to do. A lot of times it's just calling up AT&T and renewing your contract, and now you've saved your company $5,000 a year. Of course, depending on how many, pot lines you have or lines in general, but doing simple audits, calling a phone line, calling the number that's on your bill, and lo and behold, it doesn't go anywhere. So you've been paying for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, whatever it is, for these phone lines that are just ghost phone lines. With me here, not that we save so much money with printing costs. I remember early on, a long time ago, I kept having to deal with repairing the printer myself. This was probably a decade ago, a decade and a half, who knows? We'll talk about that. There was this fulfilled a need. The supplies in general, it was unlimited printing. People were printing books out. It was a lot to get toner, to get, paper. Same thing with the coffee stations. That was low hanging fruit as well too, in a way. We were seeing expenses in some of the buildings where it was, at the height of it, $8,000 a month in coffee supplies. That's a massive number. So if you can trim down and just kind of set a flat number for that, your investors are so much happier, with you, and you're forward thinking. ILS, review your ILSs, see who's performing, who's not. That's easy analytical data that you can see. How many applications did I get from XSLS? Don't be afraid to fire them. It is what it is. You have to do what's best for the asset. Sometimes you just maybe not necessarily fire, but try a different company. Another last point on that is maybe like the high vac overflow switches, which can help you with insurance rates too. If you install those, and it can help with leaks, setting up an Ecobee on the high vac system to where if you have a vacant unit, make sure it doesn't drop below a certain degree so that you don't have pipes freezing. So this kind of forward thinking things that can pay dividends, not only with your bills at the moment, but also help prevent, future disasters.
Well said. We can tell you're very passionate about this.
Yeah, very well said. I think from my perspective, a good way to summarize what you said, Juan, is like preventative maintenance. And I've seen it on the client services side. I've seen it on the operations side. When you take over an asset that's been poorly managed, it's a large cost to get it back up to standard operations. So if you put into place preventative maintenance programs for all of the things that Juan mentioned, that helps maintain the property at a better level and it reduces costs overall. So instead of, dealing with fires, emergencies that come up, you're handling things before they become a big emergency. And I think that's something that, again, needs to be a conversation with the client, with the owner, understanding what their goals are long-term, where they see this asset, what kind of capital plan they want in place at this particular asset. And I think it's really important to have those conversations, and whether or not they decide to go with your recommendations on a preventative maintenance plan, at least you can say, I told you last year that we needed to do, the canine inspections, or I told you we needed to change the elevator vendor. They're coming out all the time. We need to switch it up. So those are the types of conversations that you need to have so that you can explain to them when you're putting money in the budget, hey, this is why I'm putting the money in the budget, because we have been neglecting XYZ. Or if we put in the money for the LED lighting, it will save us overall. And there are great companies out there that will even do that for no cost to the owner. In certain states, there's rebates. I know in Chicago there is. So you can work with vendors that will install lighting for you at no cost. So looking into those type of programs and talking to other people in the industry, I think is really critical. Just to understand, because I've been in this industry for a while and there's still things somebody will mention and I had no idea. So just having those conversations, talking with clients, talking with colleagues at other properties, I think is so important.
All right, great ideas here. And I'm sure we'll have a transcript of this after, because there's a lot to think about from what we just discussed. I'm gonna insert a question from our chat window. Tiffany is from Iowa. She is new to the industry, so welcome to Multifamily, Tiffany. And she writes that there are no local resources or leadership to assist her with budgets. Does anyone have a suggestion of where else to look online for more webinar or online budget workshops?
I can pop in. I think that if it was me, I would start by talking to my manager, whoever that is, about the need for some local resources and assistance. If that wasn't an option, then I know that NAA has a ton of resources. If you're an NAA member, that's somewhere else that I would look. And then I would also reach out to local colleagues that work either for your company or for other companies. Even if they're in a different market, they still might be able to do a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting with you and kind of walk you through the budget process of this company. I think just asking the question, raising your hand, saying that you need help is really important. And if you're not getting it directly from your company, there are a lot of online resources for our industry. I feel like LinkedIn is a really good resource. There's a multifamily group on Facebook, there's NAA, there's so many resources. And I feel like a lot of the people in the industry are really helpful and willing to help. So just find someone that is able to help you and give you some insight. But I would first start with your manager and just explain, what your issues are and what help you need.
Well said. Well said. All right. And then going back to this slide, we have 2 more sub bullets. I'll list them off. All right. And these go hand in hand. So maybe we can knock it off with one question. Which technology efficiencies are now ready to drive category savings in 2024, whether staffing or on the vendor side? And how might you be evaluating these technologies, or have you evaluated them to know that they're ready to actually drive change this year?
I'd say it's a few points, and I'll be kind of brief on them. It's outsourcing some of these opportunities, tech companies to your team. Hire smart, hire people who maybe think of the same mindset, who are just want to work hard, and maybe they necessarily aren't in our industry, maybe in the hospitality industry, but hire people who have the grit, who want to learn and help them help you, help everybody in a way. But that would be a point. But if your company also has the bandwidth, maybe if you're, if you have a fellow, if you're a community manager, you test out one of the companies, one of the, strategies. Your sister property tests something else out too. Don't test the same company for the same need, but I would test them out for the same need, but it would be different companies. So kind of vet them all together. Attend industry events is another huge one. So NNA, the conferences, to Nichole's point earlier, those, attending a lot of these industry events help a lot. You can ask, look for a company that fulfills your need. Find, don't be brave. Don't be afraid to take the risk. Of course, measure out and calculate the risk versus the reward. But if you're possibly only saving $100 a year and you're going to put in a few hours worth of work, not worth it. But if you're going to save a few $1,000s, possibly, then yeah, that merits some time. So be brave, stay committed, be open-minded. Are kind of some points to consider on that.
Well said.
I think it's important to get references from others in the industry. I always like to hear from other operators if they've rolled out a technology. I feel like most people are realistic in that, any technology rollout or efficiency is going to have its bumps. It's never going to be the smoothest thing ever, just because you're making a big change and you're dealing with people along the way. So change management is huge, and getting buy-in from the teams that will be utilizing that software or efficiency is so important. And then having like a realistic understanding of what that process is going to look like, what this technology can actually do, and then backing it up with more than just the data that the sales team can feed you out of a spoon, but really hearing firsthand from others within the industry of how they have worked with this program, how the rollout went, what they've seen, what impact it's had on their operations. I think that's so important. And then understanding your own operations, your own goals. It might not work exactly the same for your operations that it did for the other person's operations, but just understanding what their process was, how they piloted it, how they rolled it out, what the outcome was, and then taking that and digesting it and really thinking through strategically, how is that going to impact our organization? How are the teams going to buy into this new technology? What is it actually going to take? There's definitely a lot of great technologies in our industry, but there are some that make more work for the on-site teams. And I remember hearing, and I even thought it at times, like, the paper guest card, that's what was in place when I started. Like, sometimes that was easier because there wasn't the clunky technology. It wasn't, it was paper. You wrote it down. So you have to be able to be nimble and understand what the technology actually can do, what capabilities it has, how it's going to work day to day, what it's going to do for the site, for the team, and then really digest that and understand, is that something that is going to give us better data to make better decisions? Is it going to make the resident experience better, the prospect experience better, the site member, team members experience better? And how is that going to happen? And there are going to be pain points along the way. So what are those pain points going to be? And having that conversation with everybody and getting everyone's buy-in, I think, is so important, because it's change management, and that is always hard with people.
Yep. Well said. Well said. All right. We've talked a lot about expenses. Now we get to go to the other side of the budget. Revenue. All right. So what are revenue driving strategies that we see helping out with the top line in 2024?
I'd say rents are going to be the big one, or one of the biggest ones. If you're able to increase, if a lot of us now have revenue management platforms, and so if you're able to see that the comps are slightly above you, then increase your rates a little bit. Don't be afraid to increase, even if it's just $5. Don't on that unit type. Don't be afraid to do that. I'm raising if you recently had an amenity renovation, don't be afraid to increase your amenity reservation costs. It costs us to renovate those spaces, so it makes sense to also offset some of those costs, for those spaces. So within reason, of course. Pet screening. So many companies now are onboarding screening companies that will vet pets, emotional support. So many times we see, unfortunately, some fraud that comes with it, where somebody prints out an emotional therapy support certificate and it's not valid. It was just, something somebody printed out from online. So, you can help increase your pet rents, your pet fees, by making sure that we're all holding everybody, accountable. Parking rate increases, depending on your market, of course, but I've seen this in the Chicago market, the rates post-pandemic, a lot of people have been driving, and the rates in general we've seen increase. So taxes increase on a lot of us as well too, especially if you're in Chicago. So offset some of those costs. Don't be afraid to raise maybe every other year or every year if it's a nominal, but increasing the rates, reevaluating some of these fees is it's important. Another ways maybe to get more leases as well, in line with income here, is maybe looking to partner up with neighboring companies. If you've got a school nearby you, offer a partner discount, a student discount, to drive a steady flow of leases to your buildings. Another big component, for some of the buildings is if you have international or out of state folks, which we've seen a lot of people moving from different states, it more so than other years, I feel, this year, and having, virtual digital drone tours, whatever have you, having that marketing component is also very, very important. And keep in mind, all of these reducing expenses, increasing NOI, increasing income, which translates to higher NOI. A small increase of, let's say, $5,000 to increasing your NOI at the end of the year above budget can equate to, a substantial $50,000, $100,000 in asset valuations. So these are all quantifiable numbers that you can also present, when you're talking to your supervisor about, hey, a merit increase or a promotion in general. So these actions that we're all talking about here, they pay dividends.
Agree. Rent's definitely going to be the biggest focus, just because it has the most impact on moving the needle. But I think, to Juan's point, it's really important to make sure that your fees are in line with the market, that you're evaluating, vendor partnerships that make sense, like pet screening or a parking solution, any way that you can kind of think outside the box, try and figure out a better way to do something to make more money, obviously within reason that makes sense. But I also think that there's going to be a bigger push on the renewal side. And I know we're going to get into retention later, but vacancy is one of the leading costs that takes away from that income. So how can we, property management, make sure that that's a big focus? And how do when is it worth, retaining the resident at a little bit lower rate than you would get on a new lease? So I think that's going to be a really big focus for a lot of clients and ownership groups in 2024.
Well said. I have a follow-up question. Have either of you seen any meaningful ancillary revenue generators come about in the last few years or even recently that can actually move the needle? I know that they're small things that have been tested and piloted, and oftentimes I think that it's rather small, right, in terms of dollars. But has anything come about that is actually meaningful for budget?
I feel like there are definitely some good technologies out there, good systems out there, good vendor partnerships that will, give additional ancillary income. I don't know that it moves the needle quite as much as obviously the rent piece. But I think kind of packaging them all together. So pet screening is one that I've used in the past. And then we also had a parking solution at that property. And so those little amounts added up. And then I think the biggest thing, which isn't necessarily a solution, but on the utility billing side, is figuring out, what your submarket is doing and making sure that your utility billing is in line with what the market dictates, but also it's a huge revenue generation. I think more so than maybe some of the technologies out there personally. Juan, I don't know if you've come across anything impressive.
The only, I guess, meaningful, and by meaningful, it's not a big dollar amount, but it helps in other ways, would be e-premium insurance. Helps with the residential insurance management. And so there's also some income that's being made through that. Vending machines, surprisingly, they give you some type of income as well too. So if you get on board with one of those, they've gotten really nicer, fancier ones. So ATM income, that's a steady $100 a month. But these are, to your point, these are some of the ancillary, smaller, lines of income that it'd be nice to have. In addition to your regular lines of income, which asset managers love to see that you're trying to do that.
Great. And Lynn from the audience also added that Poo Prints and Park M are great ones too. So great discussion. Let's go on to the last slide, which is kind of hand in hand with revenue generation, retention strategies. What retention strategies are you all adopting in 2024?
Nichole, would you like to start? I feel like I've been starting this whole time, so I don't.
Sure, I can start. So, I think retention, like I kind of alluded to earlier, is going to be a bigger focus for a lot of owners and clients. It's obviously easier and usually more cost effective to retain a resident than to replace that resident with a new resident. And the longer that resident lives in the building, the more sticky they are, the more they're likely to refer other people to the building. And I think the biggest impact from what I've seen and the research I've done on whether or not someone's going to renew, it's kind of two pieces. One is how their move-in and their first week, how that experience goes. If it goes really poorly, they're less likely to renew. And if it goes really well, then they start on a really good foot. And if something happens, a couple months down the line, they're a little bit more understanding that happened. And also their community within the building. So resident events have been around since I've been in the industry. And I think that they have only gotten nicer and more well thought out, and even, like professionally managed events. Something that I've been seeing pop up recently is a resident experience manager position, which is interesting. I've seen it in several deals in the Chicago market. And their role really is to improve the resident experience and to plan the events, because it's a lot of work to put out an actual, not just like, oh, let's order some pizzas, here's some pizza. I think residents expect more these days. And it's been proven that if they have a community in the building, if they have friends, that they're more likely to renew and stay there. So I think we're going to see a lot of owners and clients really pushing retention strategies in 2024. And I think, it's not just events. Like, yes, events are nice. I think it's their overall experience with the staff and with the building, and, how quickly are maintenance issues resolved, and how transparent do they feel management's being. I think that the current renters have a higher expectations than they did 10, 15 years ago. And so that's been obviously a little bit of a challenge for our industry to manage in the last couple of years since COVID. So I think as a property manager, if I was still on site, that would be one of the first things that I would look at and put together a well thought out retention strategy and look and see, how many people moved out last year? What were their reasons for move out? How many of those could I have saved? As we see interest rates rise and house prices are going up, like, we're not necessarily going to have that same environment where it is cheaper potentially to buy a house. We're going to see that it's going to flip and it's going to be cheaper to rent again. So putting together a really well thought out retention strategy that surrounds kind of everything, not just events, because if you're missing the mark on maintenance and missing the mark on managing the building just from like a day-to-day standpoint, you can throw as many events as you want, and that's not going to move the needle really with residents. You need to have a full strategy of, okay, we want these people to make friends. We want them to want to live here. We want them to feel like they have a community. We want to make sure that their maintenance requests are addressed. And I think, there's a lot of different ways you could go about it, depending on the building. If you are in a value add asset, maybe it's something where you do like a partial remodel as part of their renewal. Maybe it's, you offer to let them transfer to a renovated apartment and keep their rate the same for, the rest of their lease term, and then they get bumped up upon renewal. So anything that you can do to kind of show the residents that they matter and that you want to keep them there. And I think also getting feedback. Surveys are obviously a huge thing for everyone these days. And just getting that feedback is so important, because if there's bad feedback, you can address it. And if there's good feedback, you can keep going in that direction. You might find that the residents in your building aren't as big on resident events. So maybe you use that money that you had budgeted for resident events in a different manner. Maybe you give everyone a $5 off, $20 off, whatever, in the month of June. Like, if you aren't having people come to resident events, you have to kind of look at your particular asset and you have to figure out what's going to work best. But I think the big things are, building that sense of community, building that sense of belonging. That's going to be what's really going to help people want to stay in their buildings.
I definitely agree with that. And I would summarize that in a way for in the terms of the resident retention is really get to meet and see your residents. And what I mean by that is somebody is really upset over maybe their lease renewal increase. Have them come to your office, set up a time, and literally seeing somebody and hearing them out, I think pays, it just goes so much farther. Getting to know their pets, the kids' names, if you're on site, that's so it really speaks to the residents. If you have the opportunity to talk to a resident who's tenured, who's been there for forever, ask them what they love, what they hate about the building. I would ask that question, so many times when I see somebody who's been there more than 3 years at whatever building I'd be at. Elevator talk also is a great way to kind of gauge the feeling of the building. I remember so many times when I'm moving into a building when I was a manager on site, or in general, I would just start elevator. It's like, oh, hey, how do you like the building? I'm just recently moving in, and this or that, and really just get honest feedback. So many times they wouldn't know who I was. So getting raw feedback helps a lot. to your point, Nichole, and the resident events, yeah, they're something that whether you have Flamingo, Live It Living, the Pear Chefs, there's so many great platforms out there to help you manage all these resident events. But also keep in mind too, if you want to, you can also save some money by doing some of these events, with your own team, and having your team actually work the event. And there's been times where I bartended the events to save money and also to meet a lot of the residents. It was a different, approach I bartended for many years, and so a while ago, and so it was really nice to have that different kind of interaction with some of the residents. They appreciate it a lot. It's some great memories you make there. And every year the resident GL account, that was one line item that I wouldn't really save money on. That's one GL that expense item that I would always go up by 1 to 3%, but I would always add so many more events because I would be thinking of how to save money for these events, because it's so important keeping that resident intention up. Another great thought is which many people already do, are resident referral campaigns. You want people to have their friends, their family in your building. It's what better place? It's like, oh, let me just take the elevator ride to go see my sister, my brother, my mother. It makes it so that it's your home. It's you have your family and friends there close by. And that gives you a new marketing word of mouth platform now. And I think that's a lot more, it speaks a lot more than just a digital marketing campaign that you're doing. But yeah, a customer service is so important nowadays. And I feel like it's a lost art. It's, to me, a follow-up goes so far. It goes so far, whether it's at move-in, and I equate it to the restaurant industry. If you ever served, or if you're eating fine dining, wherever you're at, it's when you get your meal, you want somebody to ask you later on, hey, do you need anything else? How's the food tasting? That's so important. And so many times I'll have my business cards when people do great customer service, because I think being asked and having great customer service is so important, and it's a lost art, I think. So that follow-up is so important, whether it's at move-in or after a work order, or you had a very upset resident for whatever XYZ reason, then you want to know, hey, how did our solution work for you? Did it not work? How can we make it better? Marketing online, reputation management is so important. Make sure your Yelp, your Google scores are at least 3.5 stars. Some of the new buildings that I took over, unfortunately, they don't have that just yet, but it's not something you can do right away. But there's different strategies you can do to help bring it up. There's also, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. But yeah, Instagram also. So keeping a presence there. So if you got your Instagram feed, keep it, don't have a cookie cutter, keep it real. If you've got those resident events, post pictures up, of course, clear with your residents too. But a lot of times, many of them like to see, hey, my building's doing this fun event, and I get to be a part of it.
You both have mentioned surveys. In recent surveys, has anything popped out as a trend that residents are asking for maybe an additional service, an additional need that may not always be met, or is it really? I mean, maybe there isn't one thing that's popping out, but has anything changed, especially now that folks are spending a lot more time in their apartment communities with hybrid work or fully remote work? Any trends that you're leaning into based on survey data?
I'd say parking is a big one. Parking is so hard in Chicago right now. Golf simulators, coffee amenity, printing amenities. There's a long list of amenities, and I could go on and on of wants, but those are kind of some of the bigger ones. At the end of the day, people just want to really feel a part of the community, though, I feel, is the biggest sentiment is from when I'm reviewing the surveys, which is, to Nichole's point, I agree. That's one of the best ways to get the pulse on the building, is really sit down and read those surveys. Get a cup of coffee and just either print them out, although I don't like printing things out sometimes if you can avoid it, but print them out sometimes and have a cup of coffee and just really sit down and read them.
I think that surveys are great. And I do think that there's some amenities that I've seen specifically in new developments, I feel like they're always on the cutting edge of, new ways of operating. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that if you're not meeting the basic functions of a manager, it really doesn't matter what amenities you have. So it's really important to focus first and foremost on managing the building, making sure that maintenance requests are being completed, making sure that you're communicating with residents, because those are the areas that I have seen, even in the nicest buildings, miss the mark. And then that's all the residents are talking about. With that being said, some other items that I've seen that have been really popular lately are rentable offices, where residents who are working from home can rent, a space, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. Because I think even for those that work from home 100% of the time, just like getting out of your home and going somewhere else, even if it's in the same building, is important. You need a change of scenery. Podcast studios have been popping up, which I think are really cool. I've seen like DIY / like craft rooms / just like something unique that, is not the old like movie theater. I feel like that was kind of the thing for a while, and I haven't seen as many of those recently. But I would say the offices have been really the most impressive and the thing that's moved the needle, because I guess it kind of answers your question earlier. It's not a software per se, but it does add some ancillary revenue to the property. And then I think the biggest thing that I've seen on the new development side as well is mixed use developments with really well thought out first floor retail spaces, and or like a community where it's, the apartment building, but then there's shops right there. There's a local wine store, all of those things that people can literally walk outside and go with their friends and grab a glass of wine at the local wine store. They can, they got to run a Target because they forgot something. So there's Target right down the street. They run there, they get their thing, like things that make their lives more convenient. I think are going to be the future of our industry and how we can best serve them as residents. So that might include, adding in cleaning services. Like, do you want to add in a cleaning service once a month or 2 times a month or every week? And, that could be a revenue generating tool for the building, but also the resident doesn't have to like set that up. They don't have to find a cleaning company that can come in. They just, have a list of services that they can reach out to from the management company. I think we're going to see more of that as well.
Great feedback there from you both on those new technologies. Now we've reached the end of the content portion. So in the last 7 minutes or so, we'll open it up to Q&A. We have answered the couple questions that came up live. So at this point, we don't have questions in the Q&A, but there are still many folks in the audience. If you'd like to ask a quick question as a follow-up now's the time to do it. We can also maybe talk a little bit extemporaneously while we wait. I did have a follow-up on the last point, Nichole, for rentable offices, which I have also seen popping up among clients. Are you using any software that you can recommend to manage the booking and revenue of those rentable offices?
So far, it's just been built into our operating software. So Yardi, RealPage. I haven't seen anyone kind of bring in a new software yet. I'm sure somebody will. Seems like an opportunity, but yeah, so far it's been more manual. And I've seen, I would say the majority of the rental offices I've seen have been more of weekly and monthly, so a little bit easier to manage logistically. But daily as well could make that a need where you need to know who's in what office on what day.
I've seen Rise VTS do that pretty easily. That's nice. It's nice. They've got a great plan for that. And then Lively as well too is another great platform. for like those amenity reservations. And I agree. Yeah, those business booths have been really sought after. You know, they're great to use. They really are.
Well said. Well said. While we wait for any questions, panelists, any other things that you wanted to mention about budget season? Anything that we didn't get to that you'd like to add in?
I would say just have a great team, hire smart, you know, having somebody help you with your day-to-day work so that you have more ability to learn yourself more. Nobody knows everything. I don't know everything. There's so much I don't know. But giving somebody a helping hand and not seeing it as hey, I'm training you and I'm concerned about my job security now. I think that's not the way to look at it. Look at it as like, hey, you're giving yourself more bandwidth to do more. I think is good to know, and not being afraid to ask those questions to fellow peers, to people above you, whatever it is, because you know that not everybody knows everything. So
I agree, and I think I started as a leasing consultant, and I think asking those questions before you're in a position where you are tasked with writing a budget is so important. And I think just staying calm through budget season, it can be a lot, but the more stressed and frustrated you get, the harder it is for you to perform at your, top performance. So finding ways to unwind after a long day, or finding people in your community, colleagues, or people at other companies that you can just commiserate with, I think is so important. But I would say just like, don't stress. It's just like anything else in this industry. It's always changing. You might write it tomorrow and then find out you got to change, a whole category because of some new thing. So just do your best and take a deep breath.
start early. Don't wait till the month of when you have to present and your VPN doesn't connect, and your VPN should have connected you should have known that from the get-go. So don't wait for last minute tech issues. Be like, oh, well, I can't open my budget. Well, it doesn't show you open your budget at all since we started. So don't be that person. It's not so bad once you just start it. So
great advice. Okay, well, we haven't seen any Q&A come in. We're down to a couple minutes, so we'll just end now. But thank you again, Juan and Nichole, for spending your time with us and passing along some really well-earned wisdom and your ideas and insights. I'm sure the audience is very thankful for them. And to remind everybody, yes, this presentation was recorded, will be shared with you. I believe we'll also share a transcript if you want to search for a certain thing you heard and read more about it. So thank you again, everybody who joined, and our awesome panelists, and Becky for putting this all together. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next WithMe webinar.
thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.